Since the fires, what impact has that had on the year? There's been some funding associated with it. There's been a lot involved, and personally driving that 10 lane. So to come and talk to us, she's been really trying to coordinate activities there. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So as we said earlier, and Julie just said, so yeah, based down in Parks Victoria, down at the Mount Giddy office, and I've been asked to talk about what Parks Victoria's been doing since your last forum in 2015. So I thought I'd start off with a bit of an overview, but actually I don't think I need to do that now because I think Stefan and Peter have provided that very well. So I'll probably focus more on what we've been doing, where, how we're doing it, a little bit about what we've achieved and what's coming up next. So I think, as Stefan already said, there's a number of documents that guide our deer control program. Don't need to say much more about that. And again, Parks Victoria's approach fits in with those documents about working on new incursions, protecting biodiversity from deer impacts. Again, we're also contributing to research and monitoring, trying to do it in an integrated approach. Again, the strategy talked about collaboration and partnership, so trying to do that. And then also learning by doing, and so adapting what we're doing all the time. And again, as we said, it's that shared responsibility to manage, so working with organisations like HVP, working with neighbours, and also then learning from other programs across the state. So I think I spoke at the 2015 forum that we had up here, and at that time I think there was very few deer control programs happening across the state. We had just started the deer control trial up in the Alpine National Park. Again, as Peter mentioned, that was focused on looking at whether ground shooting, because that's the main technique we had at the time, whether ground shooting could reduce the impact on the alpine peatlands, a nationally threatened community on the high plains. We'd never done it before, so we sort of wanted to try how it would go. And it was set up as a trial, so we did some before control monitoring, we did our deer control, and then we've done after control monitoring. We're still, the Centre for Invasive Species Solutions is still analysing all that data, but at this stage it does look like the deer numbers have reduced, and again anecdotally, which will be hopefully confirmed by their analysis, we are showing reduced impacts of deer in that environment. So then we skip ahead to so at that time that was one of the only programs happening. Skip ahead to the fires in 2019-20. And following those fires, when large parts of eastern Victoria were burnt, there was a significant government investment to assist in recovering biodiversity, and that involved the implementation of both pest plankton and feral animal and deer control programs across eastern Victoria. And so programs were set up all the way from Cape Howe in the far east there up into the Upper Murray and across to Mount Buffalo. And again, we used some of the learnings from the deer control trial to get those programs up and running. DELWP also did some programs. And again, I think the initial part of it was we looked at where were those critical biodiversity values. And in eastern Victoria, they were things like littoral rainforest and rainforest sites of significance. Again, the alpine peatlands up in the northeast, up there, and then a range of values in the Upper Murray that we were looking to protect. And again, we worked with DELWP, we worked with HVP, again to get those programs up and running. And again, just talk about some of the deer impacts. And then again, we say using a range of techniques, but really at this stage we've only got two. One is shooting and then one is fencing. But then shooting, we've been using aerial shooting and ground shooting and trying to integrate those as much as possible. So aerial shooting is a daytime activity, targets a lot of the remote and or inaccessible country. Ground shooting is a nighttime activity, working in those accessible areas and looking at combining those tools to get the best results. We've been able to work cross tenure with some of our ground shooting programs, so we had to get approval from the Minister to work off park, which we got. So we've been working in HVP land in some areas, We've even had HVP coordinating work in some of our land. Our contractors that we use to do the deer control have also spent a lot of time talking to local landowners adjacent to the parks for either access or, permission to also contribute to control on their property. And again, everything we do is, focusing on safety. And again, we use with our ground shooting the information that they get, we feed into the aerial shooting team that, this is where we're seeing lots of deer at the moment or deer sign, and then we can send a, aerial team in there. Again, as I mentioned, safety is a concern, so we need to be able to let people know when and where we're doing our work. And then the other thing with aerial shooting, we need to close parks to do that, so we need to let people know that that's happening. We have worked a lot again, worked through looking at each individual park and looking at, where we need to focus on, but also then minimising impact to visitors. It's been quite a challenging job, and I don't think we always get it right. When we started, and it was a small program, we could do a lot more like personalised notifications, but now because we're running right across eastern Victoria, it's had to be a bit more broader than that, where we send out emails to people whose email addresses we have advising them of the program. We put up flyers and signs actually on site, and then there's also information on Parks Victoria's website. So again, now to get more into a bit more onto what we've been doing on the ground. So Upper Murray Parks and Reserves here. This is again after the 2019 fires. The focus was on working in those areas that were burnt. So you've got Mount Minimatite, Burrowa Pine Mountain, Wobble Wilderness is just off the map there. But we also worked at Mount Lawson and Mount Rainier, and also Pheasant Creek there and Mountain Creek, in areas that weren't burnt, because there was a fear that numbers might build up in those areas because they've moved out of the burnt areas and into there. So we worked in those areas as well. Again, so I'll just go through each park individually to say what we've done and give a bit of a general idea of what some of the results are that we've achieved. So Mount Minimatite was totally burnt in 1920. We did an integrated aerial and ground shooting program and targeting deer and goats. It was very challenging to ground shoot, so we didn't have much success there. And we had more success with aerial shooting. And again, so the program started aerial shooting started in February 2020. And that was still at the time when we had fires. And then again, we started again in October of that same year, and then worked across that whole of eastern Victoria. I've only got the 21-22 results, and that's aerial shooting. So the green is is low numbers of deer being shot, and it's sort of it's been sort of individual deer shot throughout the park. And as I said, we didn't have much success with ground shooting. Again, Burrowa Pine Mountain, totally burnt in 1920, another integrated aerial and ground shooting program targeting deer and goats. And here we've had fallow deer and sander deer as well as goats. This is one area where we worked with HVP for permission to shoot ground shoot up in their pine plantation next door. So this is what our ground shooting results look like, and this is since the program started in 2020. And you can see the hot spot there in red, which is on HVP land. And again, that's with ground shooting, that's at night. The deer leave the park and head into the plantation there. So we've had good success in targeting deer in those areas. And again, so then aerial shooting, also quite successful around the boundary, but again, because it can access some of those remote areas where there's no tracks, no vehicle access, it's been able to get deer in those areas. I think the populations have been lower in those areas following the fires, and hopefully it'll take a while for them to build back up again. So Wobble Wilderness, totally burnt in 2019-20, aerial shooting only because of the limited access, again targeting deer and goats. And again, and this is again only what we got in 21, 22. I think that we have got quite a lot of deer out of their aerial shooting. I think, as someone said, over time it's going to get harder. One, to see the animals, so that our results may change, but also, we might have success. So, we're getting less animals now. Pheasant Creek, I don't have the results for this one. So Pheasant Creek is partially burnt. It's ground shooting only, again targeting deer and goats. And this is where we've been working with HVP, who has a program managing deer throughout their plantation. So they kindly, we were contributing to that, but they're now working on that. And I think Brett's one of the contractors doing that work. And again, it's one of the other tools that we sometimes use is fencing. But it's very much on a small scale, and it's really to protect those really significant values where either no or very little impact is what's needed. We've also got fencing, a couple of fences on the Bogong High Plains, protecting some species that occur nowhere else in the world up there. Again, Mount Lawson and Mount Rainier state parks, neither of those were burnt in the fires, and we're just ground shooting in those ones, targeting deer and goats, and they've actually got a couple of red deer around Mount Rainier in our ground shooting program. And again, so that's the results we've been getting. Again, those focuses on that, interface there. So where to from here? So I think the fire recovery effort is winding down now, and we're moving more into the working under the Victorian Deer Control Strategy. So it'll be more about protecting biodiversity. So we're in that phase that Stefan talked about, which is looking at where are those critical values that we need to protect and where we'll get the best value from the work that we're doing. But the Upper Murray, I think it's likely that our programs will continue in the Upper Murray into the future.
Well done. Isn't that fantastic, the work that's happening in the parks? I'm just so inspired by what you've been doing, Lane. That's fantastic. So certainly a different story from 2015. Isn't it?
Oh, yeah, that's right.